And there's people that are fighting for their lives right now. And for me, there's not a single family member out there who has someone that is in the hospital right now that is thinking this is any kind of hoax at all. So for me, there's no part of me that thinks this is a hoax or that we should take it lightly.
Hello, everyone. I'm Alex Renneman at Unleashed Tiger, and I'm here with Kevin Deming, Pastor of Ministries at Chestnut Ridge Church, Morgantown. And also, maybe you weren't so happy to have, is also in your moniker is you have tested positive for COVID-19. Thanks for coming on the program, Kevin.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, not under these circumstances, but thanks for having me.
Right. And I'm not bringing you on, just so everyone knows, as a sideshow. I mean, there's so much unknown and mystique around this because it is a novel virus and we don't know anything. We've never had it before. And there's all these news reports and everything. And I just thought, man, it would be great to bring on someone local who's kind of living through this. And we know, look, you're not a doctor. We've had doctors on this program. They can share all the statistics and what's going on and all that. But I wanted people to be able to hear your story and what you lived through. And it doesn't mean that your story is going to be their story and how you reacted to the disease is going to be theirs. But I just thought it was really interesting, and I'm really grateful for you. I didn't know you, or just reached out, and you were happy to come on, and I'm really thankful for that. I think people will benefit from hearing your story. So I really am super grateful and thankful for you coming on today.
I appreciate that. Yeah, and just reiterating that, my story is my experiences, and I cannot say that everyone else is going to experience things the same way. And at any point, if anyone who is sick or has symptoms, reach out to your doctor and talk to them. I just think it's so important that we, during this time, that we are keep an eye on those things and realizing that we need to be in communication with our doctors if there is any concern that we have.
That's right. Hey, so can we just start? Can you just kind of give us your story of how you got it all? Just kind of walk us through that.
Yeah. On March 2nd, my wife and I went to Israel for a trip on a tour there, and we were excited to go. Her father-in-law was hosting a trip, and so we wanted to go along with them, knowing that they're in their 70s, a little bit, might be one of the last times they go, so we wanted to spend that time with them. And right about the time that we were getting ready to leave, kind of the talk of the coronavirus was coming around, and, I remember joking day before we left with everybody going, yeah, I'll probably get it and come back and be the first one in West Virginia kind of thing and joking around, just being kind of humorous because at that time it wasn't really in the U.S. a whole lot here. And it was mainly just in China and a few other places in Italy. And so when we left, we got there, all of a sudden it just seemed like every day that we were there was more news about the virus spreading and panic starting to happen. And it was a really weird thing to be in another country and their perspective of what was happening as well. But not only that, there were just thousands upon thousands of tourists everywhere we went. And then I remember we were at Tiberias, the Sea of Galilee, down in that area for a few days. And then we went into Jerusalem, and we were supposed to go to Bethlehem and Jericho the next day to see that, and they had said no. There are cases. We were closing down. We're quarantining Bethlehem and Jericho, and we're not going to be able to go because there were some cases that came up. And so all of a sudden you start hearing these cases and thinking, wait a minute, these are people that are going through here. And then you hear the week before we were there was a group that went through from China that went through a tour, and every one of them had it. So you start thinking, okay, what is happening? Maybe there are a lot of people. And so for me, it kind of was a place where back in my mind, I was like, I'm not going to get it. It's a huge country. There's only this many cases. I'm not going to get it. But at the same time, we were extremely careful in everything we touched. We had hand sanitizer on our hands 10 times a day. You didn't want to, if you touched anything, you washed your hands. And before you eat, you wash your hands. After you wash your hands. It just felt like everywhere we went, we were just all very careful as best we could. And so I noticed I wasn't feeling great on the trip already, so I kind of didn't pay a whole lot of attention to it. But on the day of we were flying home on that Wednesday the 11th, I was on the plane, and I started noticing that I had some of the basic symptoms. My throat had been hurting. My chest was a little tight. I had asthma as a kid. So for me, I kind of understood, well, it could be allergies, could be something. And I had body aches and seemed to have a little low-grade fever. Something that I was trying to pay attention to. At the same time, I thought to myself, I don't have it. There's no way. I don't have it. But I was like, man, if I do, I don't want to take a chance to give this to anybody else. To me, I wasn't as fearful of me getting it as me giving it to somebody who would be one of the severe or critical cases. So on the plane ride, it was one of those weird things. Our plane ride was supposed to be about half to 2/3 full, but with Israel kicking everybody out of the country, our plane was completely full except for one seat. And I just thought this was hilarious. The seat was right next to me, and then I was aisle seat. So on the entire trip from Tel Aviv to Newark, I didn't have anyone sitting next to me. And so, at that time I didn't know I had it, but in the meantime, I'm thinking to myself later on, looking back going, man, if I'd have had two people on both sides of me, the chance of both of them having it would have been extremely high.
Totally.
So I'm very thankful for that. But we decided on the way in, and even in Pittsburgh, driving that flight, stayed away from people as best we could. And my wife and I decided that when we came home, we were actually going to just self-quarantine for 14 days. A lot of people on our trip were making that decision, regardless, knowing that kind of we were coming back into the world, that all of a sudden there was panic coming. So we decided to self-quarantine. We actually walked in our doors, had not seen my two 18 and 20-year-old sons in 10 or 11 days. We had a mask on and we didn't hug them. We stayed 6 or 8 feet away. We didn't hug them, and that was so hard to do. I'm like, I just can't afford to do that. And so the next couple of days, we kind of stayed away from my sons. And then on Friday, I started noticing that it just was not getting better. And, you go to read through all the symptoms, and I'm researching and Googling everything I can. All right, what's allergies versus cold versus coronavirus? What are the symptoms, and just trying to see. And I had all the symptoms, the basic ones, except for one. It says high fever 100, 203. My fever never got over 99.6. So I'm thinking, I probably don't have it then, because they've said every case is a high fever. So I called Friday and to the doctors, and they said, no, just stay home. You're okay, probably, but still stay away from people. I'm like, okay, we're still quarantining though. And then on Sunday, I just started feeling worse. And so I called Mon Health and the emergency department. They got me to them, and they said, all right, come in, let us know when you're there. We'll walk you in the back entrance. We'll make sure you don't talk to anybody. And I went through that. So I got in there, and because I had traveled, I was a little bit more high risk. I'll tell you, if I wouldn't have traveled, they wouldn't have probably seen me at that point, because of there weren't a lot of tests at this time. And so at that point, they called me in and they said, we're going to test you for strep throat, for flu, for bacterial infections, for everything. We do all of that. If all of those come back negative, then we will test you for the coronavirus. They came back about an hour later after the test came back and said, all those were negative, so we are going to test you for that. So go home, you and your family quarantine, you don't go out, you don't see anybody. So we came home. I came home and waited. It was a waiting game. That was Sunday. I didn't hear till Thursday night that I had it. And I got the call. I'll be honest with you, I was convincing myself I don't have it. It's just a bad cold. It's just a sinus infection. It's just this. Right. And I got that call. And just in that moment, it felt really weird. It's one of those things where, wait a minute, this is something that the entire world is talking about. And all of a sudden, I tested positive. So at that point, I was thankful that we had quarantined. I had not been in contact with anybody, nor my wife have. My sons were quarantined since that Saturday, and they didn't even see us the first 2 days back. So we were able to keep everybody safe from spreading it here in the area.
That was so wise.
But yeah, it was just crazy.
Yeah. So I don't want to miss the fact that you're still not feeling well. And just for everyone's, again, thank you for coming on. Who wants to be interviewed while they're still kind of recovering from a flu and not feeling well? But you got some other stuff going on. Can you just give us an update on how you're feeling today and what your situation is now?
Well, the symptoms kept going, and I still kept having issues. And I'm on like day 19 of not feeling good right now. And so Thursday I was getting really tired. Friday and Saturday I found myself not ready to hardly get out of bed. I was still running low-grade fever. My body was aching. I didn't feel good. And on Sunday, I decided to call back the emergency department and the doctor I'd been talking to and said, hey, I am just not getting better. And they said, come back in. So I went back in. He said, and I really appreciated this about the doctor. He said, look, we're going to test you for everything. We don't want to have our blinders on just because you tested positive for this, that all of your symptoms and everything you have is this. So we're going to test you for a bunch of other things too. Walked back in about an hour after all my blood work was done. He said, well, I don't know if this is bad luck or not, but you not only have the coronavirus, but you also have mono. I'm like, well, that's great. So unfortunately, on top of this, I now have a mono. And I think a lot of that, and we were talking before earlier, but I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that a lot of people carry that Epstein-Barr virus in them, and then it flares up based upon low immunity and things like that. And I think that because I've had the COVID-19, my immunity is down. Sorry about that. And so therefore, I think these symptoms of mono have relapsed. And so now it's another 2, 4, 5 weeks. I don't know. We'll see.
Man. Well, hopefully it's soon that you recover and are feeling better. You mentioned your in-laws, you mentioned your wife, your sons. Can you share with us what so have they contracted it? Do you know what's happening there?
Yep. Well, the doctor essentially said they presume that everyone in my house has it at this point. We're quarantined together, living together for 2 weeks, and as best we're trying to be apart. It's one of those things you just expect that everyone's going to have it. My wife has had all the symptoms that I had. She clearly would have tested positive. She's actually feeling a little bit better. She's still coughing some and still has some of the milder symptoms, but she's improving. My 20-year-old son also had the basic symptoms that we experienced, and the symptoms were really sore throat, chest tightness, cough, low grade. All of us have had a low grade fever. None of us have had a fever over about 99.6 range. None of us over 100. So, which is interesting because at first when it came out, you thought that if you didn't have that, you wouldn't have it. Right. That's something that all three of us, none of us have had a fever over about that. But there's 2 other symptoms that were really unique, and they were unique to all 3 of us. Was this headache that comes from the back of your head all the way to the base of your skull. It's really one of the worst headaches. Really painful, and it's all in the back of your skull, down your neck area. And then the other symptom was felt like my sinuses were on fire all the way up through the back of my eyes and my sinuses. Mm-hmm. And every time you breathe through your nose, it just felt like it was on fire, and that would last for hours. Oh. It would last for hours upon hours. And the only way to stop it was to not breathe through your nose, basically. So, and all 3 of us had those symptoms. My youngest son, 18, has always had his little runny nose, and he's been great. So he's one of those probably asymptomatic people who just are not expressing much symptoms at all. So that's good.
Yeah, and that asymptomatic thing, it's something we were discussing. That can be a scary part because they say, folks can spread it being asymptomatic. And again, we're not doctors, we're not epidemiologists, but at least in your experience, it may be that it's not quite as violently contagious in that stage, right?
Yeah, and like you said, trust your doctors on this. I have heard that it is not from some doctors, but understand this is just me saying this, as contagious when you're asymptomatic. Doesn't mean you can't give somebody the virus. Obviously, if you sneeze or cough and then they touch whatever that was, you're spreading it. But it just is interesting to me that I would have been asymptomatic for 2 to 5 to 7 days while I was in Israel with a tour group of 55 people. And thankfully, only 2 other people got it in the whole trip. Oh, wow. So to me, it makes, and those are the 2 people who also traveled with us on the day that we traveled back. None of the other groups of people that were with us that were traveled from other areas or different flights got it. So to me, it just makes sense that we're probably not as contagious when we're asymptomatic. At the same time, I am not a doctor, and if you've been around somebody that has it, whether you show symptoms or not, quarantine yourself.
Yeah. And really, hats off to you. it looks like you guys really took the wise path and did all the right things. From what we see from experts recommending, what do you do? All that data was out by the time when you were feeling this. So you were already doing those things, which was really great. Have you had any outreach from the Mon County or the state or anybody like that in terms of a contact tracing or something like that? Can you talk about what's happening there?
Yeah, the night they called me and said my test was positive, they went through a list of what flights were on, where did I stay in Israel, what hotels, all of that. So that they reached out to those people. We reached out to our tour group that we were with and let them know. We also reached out to everybody who was on the bus with us, on the tour with us, as well as the tour guide and all of them. And the tour guide quarantined himself for 14 days, as well as everybody on the buses. And thankfully, out of that, just my wife and I and two other people were the only people that got it.
Yeah, wow. That's really great. You have more kudos to you for being pretty vocal about your experience and sharing with others so they can explore that, coming on here and speaking with us. What would you say to those? I mean, stigmatization is a concern for some. What would you say to those who either believe they have it or have tested positive? What would you offer for them from that perspective?
Well, for me, the number one thing for me all along was I don't want to take a chance and be responsible for anyone else having it. And so to me, I didn't care whether I had it or didn't have it, whether someone knew or didn't know. It was all about making sure that if I even thought that it was a possible, that I wanted to make sure that I did as much self-isolation, well, I guess the word we use now, social distancing, as possible. And I'd recommend if you are not feeling good and have any of these symptoms, just stay home, stay away from others, do the best you can in making sure that we're not spreading this.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you look at some of those statistical graphs and charts that show about social distancing and how it does work. It does seem, I mean, anecdotally, to be having some effects in certain countries and other places or communities where you see it's being done versus not. So, a few minutes of social media or the news, and you will see both ends of the spectrum. Some calling it a hoax, saying it's nothing different than the seasonal flu. The other folks on the other side. What would be just your perspective? And again, we're not pundits, we're not experts, but you are a guy living it. What would you say to folks that are saying, hey, this is a hoax, it's all overblown, this isn't a big deal?
Well, I would probably say it's somewhere in between, both of those. But as a hoax, it's not a hoax. I know that it gets in our minds thinking, wait a minute, why do we have to go this extreme? It isn't going to just, it's just like the flu, and you kind of go back and forth on that. And the reality of it is, and that's one reason why I actually went online and posted that I had it, is I had not seen people that I knew saying they had it. And so if you don't know someone personally that has it, in your mind, you're going to go to a hoax. I don't know anybody who really has it. Is it really that bad? But I mean, I just know here in our state already, we're seeing the effects of it. And the nursing home here, Sundale Nursing Home in Morgantown, is just devastated by it. And of course, there's a couple other counties and places in West Virginia that are getting hit hard with this. And there's people that are fighting for their lives right now. And for me, there's not a single family member out there who has someone that is in the hospital right now that is thinking this is any kind of hoax at all. So for me, there's no part of me that thinks this is a hoax or that we should take it lightly in that.
Yeah. Well, and thank God that so far you guys are doing fine, and
Yeah.
that's not the case for everybody. And you have some of those risks. You said you had asthma as a kid. Obviously mono's hanging around in there. It's maybe crept back up. So that's really great news. With Easter coming and some of the talk of whether on the national level or anywhere else. Obviously, what a symbolic moment would be for everybody to get together and worship together on the day the stones roll away and all those things from a Christian perspective. But man, that seems, by what the doctors and the experts, the epidemiologists out there, Fauci and others are telling us, it seems to be a challenge. You are a pastor of the Chestnut Ridge Church, Pastor of Ministries in Morgantown. A man of God, a guy living through this, what advice can you offer to folks that are struggling with their faith and with the ability to want to fellowship and worship together, but also in the midst of this virus that is highly contagious and could be really, really dangerous and lethal for many folks in our demographic?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do understand. I understand the value of gathering together and being with people to celebrate and worship God in that. I think that there's a lot of value in that. On the other side, we're also learning that that the building isn't what makes it special. We can worship God at home. You can worship God in your car or wherever you are. And for us, we're seeing for the first time. Thankfully, we have the technology to do this, but for that we can really connect. Just like you and I are not in the same room here, we're connecting and having a conversation like we were. And I think for us to realize that you can be together with people because of technology without being in the same physical space. So my encouragement is to really consider that. I know that there was a church in North Georgia, Cartersville, Georgia, actually, that one of the churches kind of exploded with cases where they had over 40 people. It was a smaller church and had over 40 people get it because they had a choir member who had it. Man, that person at that point, they didn't know they had it and they weren't expecting that to happen. But, we just don't want to see that happen. And right now, this is just for a season. It's just for a period of time. We're going to get through this. And in the meantime, we have the capacity to worship together via online for whatever church you may be connected with. And if you're not connected to church, you're able to find one that you can engage with and be able to see the services and be a part of it as if you were there. I know it's not quite the same, but it's a great thing we can do with technology today.
Yeah, and it's a great point. I mean, we live in a world of seasons, and that's a really great call out. This is a season, and it's for some it's a scary one, some it's a little more isolated, but it is a season. We believe, based on all the data that keeps coming about, that this won't be forever. But right now, and we can potentially shorten the season by following the guidelines now, as opposed to this turning into a longer, drawn out affair. That's a really, really good point. Staying on the theme, Christian minister, Jesus often spoke of hope. And I in any moment like this or anything else, I always like to look for where's the silver lining? What's value out of something even as scary as this pandemic is? And clearly people are dying and more people will die, unfortunately. It's gripped us all. But what can you point to? And being a guy also who's had it himself, what can you point to as hope or some silver lining through all this?
Yeah, there is a particular verse that I've clung to for the last 2-3 weeks here, and it's Romans 12:12, and it says this. It says, "Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, and persistent in prayer." And to me, those three things are really the things that I'm resting in. The idea of joyful in hope. And it's not hope that I'm not going to get sick, because that doesn't work for me. It's not hope that, your life is going to be exactly the way you want. It's not hope that everything is going to be exactly how we want it to be. Instead, it's joyful in hope that knowing that if I have a relationship with Christ, that I will be able to live forever with God in heaven. That's great. But then what about now? I think you can be joyful in hope today too. Hope that no matter what we go through, God can use that to encourage someone. The pain and the struggle that we go through can help and come alongside of someone else who also has that. So I'm joyful and hopeful that out of this, when we come out of this, we're going to be stronger as a state, as a country, as a world. We're going to be able to be better because of what we've gone through. Now, to say all that, there are still families and people that are going to lose loved ones, and that is going to be a heartbreaking scenario, and it's hard to find hope in that, and that's where you have to rest in the eternal. But for us, as we're working through this, the hope isn't that it's all going to look exactly the way we want. The hope is in Christ and who He is. And to me, then the other one is patient in affliction. It doesn't matter whether it's the COVID-19 or whether it's the seasonal flu or whether it's something else in our life. We will experience affliction. If you live long enough, you will experience affliction. There's going to be sickness, there's pain, there's hurt, there's struggle. And in that, I think that we can learn to be patient in that, to see, God, what is it that you're showing me? Who are you making me out of that? How can I be a better person out of that situation or that thing I'm going through? And so for me, it's being patient and going, all right, I thought I was about ready to get through this coronavirus. And I was ready to be cleared in the next few days. And next thing I know, now, wait a minute, you got another one. And it's something else. But I am thankful. I'm very thankful that my family's okay and that we took the precautions we needed to not spread this to other people. And so I'm thankful in that. And then the persistent in prayer. And this is one, is knowing that it isn't just prayer that we won't be sick. It's prayer for the people, for strength, for encouragement, for people to experience God in this moment, in this season. It's prayer for our healthcare workers, for the people working in these grocery stores, for the people in our police and fire and our city officials, and for the fact that we have all your postal workers and your grocery stores and restaurants and just all these people that are going to work, that are keeping things going for us, praying that they had the strength, praying for them, and knowing that a lot of us can stay at home but for them, they have to go in, and they're facing this fear, and they're in the middle of it. So be in prayer for them and for the families of those that do have loved ones in the hospital and in severe and critical conditions. So for us, it's doing those three things: being joyful in our hope. Hope is in Christ. He doesn't change no matter what happens around us. Patient in our affliction. What is God doing? How is he going to grow? And then persistent in that prayer for people that are on the front lines, who are out there experiencing this, and that people would also come to faith in Christ through a tough time, a tough season like this.
Awesome. Kevin Deming, Pastor of Ministries at the Chestnut Ridge Church in Morgantown. I am really, really grateful for you coming on and speaking with us about your experience, being so honest and candid about what you're thinking about things. And I'm grateful for your health, that you are battling through this, and your family seems to be doing well, and that you took all the right precautions early on. And I wish you the best. And thank you again. And take care.
All right. Thank you.